The party leader calls Rikudo a total dud because he can only use barrier magic, but he takes it a step further, pointing at the mage and officially banishing him from the entire country. The barrier then morphs into a giant stake that strikes right through the middle of the creature. The dragons are completely caught off guard by the blinding flash and can't dodge the mage's epic attack. The girl totally gets what's going on and catches Rikudo by surprise when she says she's tagging along for the ride. With a loud shout, our hero activates his secret art called the Evil Spirit Seal. Right under the moonlight, he commands Carmilla Vlad Tepes to become his loyal servant from this moment on. The crazy twist is that the little black cat was actually the queen of the night, Carmilla Vlad Tepes herself. Out of nowhere, the unbreakable crystal simply shatters into 1,000 pieces the second the mage touches it. The whole crowd screams in pure shock, completely mind blown by the insane power of our MC. Our story kicks off with the party leader calling our protagonist, Rikudo, a defective product because he can only use barrier magic. Just like that, he's kicked out of the party and told to get lost. The mage explains he was on his way back to town when he was suddenly sentenced to exile. Completely bewildered, he doesn't understand a thing, and the blonde guy asks if he's deaf. The guy doubles down, insisting Rikudo is useless to the party, which is why he's out. Our hero, still in disbelief, demands to know why he's being tossed aside so abruptly. At this, the leader reveals that tomorrow they are tackling a high-difficulty dungeon. He stares down the mage with a serious look, asking if he understands the reason why. This guy is a Chiburu, the crown prince of the country, who also happens to hold the hero class. Turns out, the hero title was only a big deal when the Demon King was still a threat. Now, in these peaceful times, the kingdom is living quietly without any major dangers, for the moment at least. That's why the current king has the prince clearing dungeons to improve his public image. As a court mage, Rikudo was bound to serve as the noble's guard, but things have taken a turn. The prince humiliates him, declaring that a defective mage like him is nothing but dead weight. Defective mage was the cruel nickname they given our protagonist because of his unique ability. It's all because he could only use barrier magic, which is strictly for protection. Achiburo claims he's plenty strong now and has no more use for the boy's magic. With a smug grin, he asks if Rikudo didn't witness how he demolished those monsters. The prince brags about wiping them all out in a single blow without so much as a scratch. Burning with anger, the mage clenches his fists, admitting the blonde prince faced no counterattacks. The prince boasts that for a swordsman of his caliber, a barrier is completely unnecessary. Rikudo tries to argue that even if he only creates barriers, he isn't useless to the party. But the noble shuts him down, stating the hard fact is that this is the mage's only talent. Our protagonist sadly concedes the point, but tries to explain his barriers are different. Losing all patience, the prince furiously roars that he doesn't want to hear a single excuse. The mage is left speechless by the sheer hatred in the prince's voice, which silences him completely. He tries one last time to explain the situation to His Highness, fully aware it sounds like an excuse. He points out that, for instance, monsters don't approach their camp at night because of his barrier. He also reveals he's placed barriers on everyone's bodies, a claim the prince finds ridiculous. The blonde noble says barrier magic is just a simple dome shield, and the mage agrees with him. But Rikudo insists it's a versatile magic, and he intends to support the party in his own unique way. The prince retorts that he's never once felt a barrier supporting him, leaving the mage flabbergasted. He begins to list the mage's past achievements, how despite being a commoner, his talent was recognized. The boy graduated at the very top of his class and was the youngest prodigy among the 12 court mages. However, when his skills were finally put to the test, he turned out to be nothing more than defective. Our protagonist tries to defend his actions, saying he only put up the barriers for their safety. But the prince yells back furiously, claiming he was just applying barriers that weren't even needed. The blonde noble then takes it even further, questioning if the guy was actually using any magic at all. Our hero is baffled by the accusation and asks the noble what he's trying to say. But Chiburu then throws it in his face that the barriers are, after all, invisible. Our hero clarifies that barriers are invisible to those with low magical aptitude. The prince immediately accuses him of lying about his abilities just to stay with the party. He presses on, asking if the boy wasn't simply blinded by the money the job offered. With his head hung low, our protagonist admits the noble is right about his motivation. He confesses that the reason he joined the party was indeed for the money he'd received. Rikudo explains his choice of royal service was due to the high and very stable pay. At this, the blonde noble scoffs that he knew it, calling him a greedy piece of trash chasing after money. But the mage grips his fist tightly, thinking that he desperately needed that money for his family. The prince then mocks him, saying the boy doesn't have a family since he's an orphan. Rikudo looks him in the eye and confirms it's true, he is an orphan with no parents. He was brought up in a poor orphanage, and he needs the money to send donations back to them. Out of arguments, the protagonist asks what the other members of the party think. But his companions just avert their gazes, showing no reaction whatsoever. In that moment, the boy realizes not a single one of them will stand up for him in this awful situation. One companion says that lying to take the country's money is the lowest of the low. The bald party member suggests he became a court mage through bribery or powerful connections. The final member remarks that he's never even heard of a court mage who only uses barriers. With a cruel smile, the prince sees how things are and definitively expels Rikudo from his party. But he goes a step further, pointing at the mage and sentencing him to complete exile from the country. Our protagonist becomes frantic, shouting and demanding to know why he's being exiled. The prince declares that he didn't just steal money, but the very taxes of the people. He concludes that a sinner who fakes his abilities has no place in the country. With a look of utter despair, Rikudo is told he has 10 days to leave the kingdom. The blonde noble adds that he's being merciful, as the boy's crime should have earned him a grim fate. Then, the group simply turns its back on him, and the prince orders him to pack his things and leave. At that instant, rain begins to fall, and our hero still can't process what just happened. Utterly alone, he refuses to accept that he's been exiled and abandoned by everyone he knew. His thoughts turn to the orphanage, and he realizes he may never see his family again. A look of pure fury crosses his face as he thinks of the children. He knows he has to get back to them. Full of resolve, the young man gets to his feet, determined to clear his name and fix this terrible misunderstanding. Suddenly, an idea strikes him. He'll seek out the king himself to try and reason with the prince. But as he's mulling this over, a giant shadow appears, rapidly blanketing the entire area. Out of the blue, a massive monster materializes right in front of him, its jaws wide open, ready to strike. Unshaken, our hero prepares a containment spell to trap the enormous creature. He summons a barrier of light that successfully immobilizes the giant monster for a moment. The mage notes that he's in a bit of a hurry and begins to prepare a barrier transformation. He quickly activates his attack form number 5 to take care of the threat swiftly. The barrier then morphs into a giant stake that pierces the creature right through its middle. The light fades from the monster's eye, a clear sign that it's all over and won't be a problem for anyone else. With its mouth hanging open, the huge creature collapses, defeated right before our protagonist. He notices it's still breathing and prepares his barrier's attack form number 2. At his command, the barrier transforms into a flurry of blades that slice the monster to finish it off. The young man then reflects that even though he can only use barriers, they are incredibly versatile. Despite his limitations, he's well aware that his skills are surprisingly effective in combat. Standing over the fallen monster, he proves his magic is for more than just defense. He reveals his barrier has 3 distinct forms: offensive, defensive, and support. But his thoughts are cut short when he looks up, shocked to see a flock of dragons soaring toward him. Our hero immediately prepares to fight the horde of creatures that just appeared from thin air. Rikudo grumbles that this would happen when he's in a rush, but accepts his title as a defective mage. Regardless, he focuses his mind, for he has completely mastered the use of his unique barriers. Placing his hands together, he channels his energy, getting ready to unleash one of his secret techniques. With a smirk, the mage activates the barrier transformation using his secret technique number 2. The technique is called Void, and a blinding light engulfs the area, obscuring everything from view. The dragons are caught off guard by the brilliant flash and have no chance to escape the mage's powerful attack. When the light subsides, the sky is crystal clear, with no trace of any of the creatures. The protagonist then continues on his way to the capital, hoping to sort out his situation. The young man arrives at a spot 140 kilometers from the kingdom's capital, the scene of the incident. He is now in the rural town where he grew up, aiming to meet with the people from his orphanage. This small town is named Miyoko, the place our hero considers his true home. He wanders the village streets, a mix of nostalgia and concern on his face. Completely lost in thought, he isn't paying much attention to where he's going. And just like that, he accidentally bumps into a man who immediately glares and yells at him. The man demands to know what his problem is, and our protagonist is at a loss for words. But suddenly, a young woman appears, asking the man just what he thinks he's doing. Rikudo recognizes her instantly. We see her name is Flare, and she does not look pleased. The young woman steps between them to get a better sense of the argument. She asks what happened, and the man complains that the mage bumped into him without so much as an apology. Flare reprimands him, saying that's no way to speak to people around here. She points out that the young man looks upset and that you shouldn't treat someone in his state so harshly. The man apologizes to the girl, but she insists he should be apologizing to Rikudo. She even adds that he should also say sorry for being the one to bump into our hero. Feeling awkward, our protagonist apologizes first, hoping to end the squabble. With that, the man walks off, leaving the two friends alone in the middle of the village street. Flare then flashes a warm smile and welcomes him home, asking if it's already been a whole year since he left. He confirms it has, surprised to think that so much time has passed. The young woman pulls him into an affectionate hug, telling him how happy she is to see him again. But she quickly notices how wary he looks and asks if something terrible happened. The girl's full name is Flare Serial, and Rikudo tenses up, unsure of what to say. She's the daughter of the director of the Serial orphanage, where our protagonist grew up. They are both the same age and spent nearly all their time together from childhood through their teens. In his mind, the young man recalls how Flare has always been his biggest supporter through everything. She then asks if the royal guard stopped him, and he confirms the prince ordered them not to let him pass. With a sad expression, he reveals he only came to say his goodbyes before leaving the country forever. The girl understands, then surprises Rikudo by declaring that she's going with him on this journey. Our hero is left completely stunned and speechless, asking her to repeat what she just said. So the young woman says it again, she's going with him. When he asks why, she finally confesses her feelings for him. Blushing beet red, he's lost for words as she reaffirms that if he leaves, she's leaving too. The protagonist's brain short-circuits from all the new information, and Flare asks if something's wrong. With a smile, she explains she loves him both like family and as a man, admiring his unwavering determination. In that instant, the young woman takes Rikudo's hand, a gesture to show the sincerity in her words. She reminds him that he donated every bit of his salary, telling him he no longer has to worry about that. Flare reveals that the Adventurers Guild wants her father to become the new master of the local branch. Next, she drops another bombshell: her father is getting married again, making the protagonist shout in surprise. The girl explains it's been years since her mother passed, and he's finally healed from the loss. She goes on to praise her new stepmother, saying she's highly competent and even more reliable than her own dad. Thanks to the two of them, the orphanage has escaped poverty and no longer depends on the money he sent. Rikudo takes it all in silently, a thoughtful expression on his face as he finally grasps the full picture. Flare then tells him he's worked hard enough, now he can finally live for himself. The young man considers her words, reflecting on how he truly wants to live his life from now on. To break the silence, the young woman squeezes his hand and asks if he dislikes her for some reason. Finally finding his voice, the young man responds in kind, declaring a heartfelt, "I love you," to her. With a beaming smile, the young woman says they belong together, because being by his side brings her immense joy. He then thinks to himself that he'd already decided to confess his feelings the next time they met. Flare says with conviction that a country that would cast out someone as dedicated as him deserves no loyalty. A smile spreads across our hero's face as he agrees, realizing she's absolutely right. Overcome with emotion, the protagonist asks Flare to come with him, as he now has a new purpose to guide him. With a radiant smile, she accepts, and the two decide to leave the country together, just as they'd always dreamed. Meanwhile, back in the capital of the Gaeta Kingdom, someone is seething over what just happened. The king roars with all his might, ordering his guards to bring him his idiotic son at once. He then commands that the fool who dismissed Rikudo be punished and sent to the mines. A servant questions this order, and the king threatens him, asking if he'd like a trip to the mines as well. With a grave expression, the monarch asserts that Rikudo is, in fact, a true genius. He adds that he's a talent seen once in 1,000 years and asks if the servant is aware of the capital's grand barrier. The servant recalls the anti-monster barrier, and the king reveals Rikudo single-handedly installed it. The servant is floored, and the king brings up the swarm of dragons that vanished in the blink of an eye. He then discloses that this too was Rikudo's doing, and the servant can't fathom how he managed it. The king explains there's a secret art hidden within our protagonist's barrier techniques. This secret art grants near superhuman power, making a task like that seem simple. The monarch reveals he's friends with the headmaster of the Magic Academy, who always raved about the boy's genius. Fuming, the king thinks that if his foolish son had just used his brain, he wouldn't have exiled the mage. The prince might be bragging, but the king knows his party is already growing weaker without the mage's support. With a serious gaze, the monarch is certain his son must have realized his blunder by now. Right on cue, the blonde prince struts in, announcing he has exiled the criminal who was squandering the people's taxes. The king begins to tremble with pure, unadulterated rage upon hearing his spoiled son's arrogant words. With every ounce of his strength he bellows, calling the noble a complete fool, leaving the prince shocked by his reaction. The monarch continues his tirade, demanding to know if the boy has any idea of the colossal mistake he just made. There takes offense, questioning if his perfect management was truly a foolish act. The king shouts back that his very failure to understand is what makes him a fool, for he's just released the strongest mage. Far from the capital, the couple walks, and Flare mentions they need to announce their marriage before they depart. Worried, Rikudo asks if she's absolutely sure, since she won't be able to return and will lose her job. In response, the young woman wraps him in a tight hug, showing her decision is final. With a smile, she assures him it's okay, because she's decided to support him on his journey, no matter what. Flare reaffirms this was her choice, and our hero thanks his beloved for her unwavering support. She then tugs him along to go speak with her father, encouraging him to act like a real man. Under the gentle light of the moon, the two approach the orphanage where they spent their childhoods together. Reaching the house, the young woman calls out for her father, ready to finally share the big news. A man's head appears in the window, looking down to see who's calling him in the middle of the starry night. With Rikudo by her side, the girl proudly announces she's going to marry him, and they'll be leaving together. Her father recognizes the young man and greets him warmly, asking if he's been keeping well. The protagonist finds her directness a bit shocking, but her father readily approves of their marriage. Rikudo is stunned by the quick permission and asks if her father is certain about his decision. The man replies that he knows the young man's strength and character, and because of that, he trusts him completely. He adds that he knows just how much the mage loves his daughter, more than anything else in the world. Darian reveals he'd been expecting this, as Flare was always asking when her friend would be back. Flustered and embarrassed, the young woman stumps hard on her father's foot to get him to stop talking. She then scolds him for sharing unnecessary details, leaving him wincing in pain. After recovering, the girl's father asks where the two lovebirds are planning to live now. Looking a bit sheepish, our hero scratches his head and reveals he was actually kicked out of the country by the prince. Flare erupts in anger, explaining how the idiotic prince called him useless and banished him from the kingdom. Daryun then reveals he actually trained the noble once, a piece of information that surprises the girl. He explains he did it back when he was an S-rank adventurer, a revelation that leaves her utterly shocked. Rikudo is just as astonished and complains that they always seem to forget to tell him the important things. Her father clarifies it was a direct request from the king, but since he failed to impress the prince, he was let go. From this, he concludes that the noble has been an idiot for a very long time. But he brushes that aside, saying it doesn't matter where they go, so long as his daughter is happy. Having said that, the girl's father turns and walks toward a room in the house to retrieve something. He opens a wooden door and surprises the young couple with an unexpected gift. Daryun holds out a hefty sack of money, explaining it's a wedding present for the two of them. Rikudo tries to refuse, but the man insists, saying it was the savings he'd put aside for his daughter's wedding. He finishes by declaring that from this day forward, he and his wife will protect the orphanage. Our hero gratefully accepts the gift, and Daryun reveals his wife is also an S-rank adventurer. He then warns the couple about frequent sightings of vampires and their kind in the surrounding region. The protagonist is taken aback, his mind flashing to the immortal creatures of the night that feed on the living. With a serious tone, the girl's father shares a rumor that the Queen of the Night has been recently revived. The young man learns she's an ancient vampire queen, so powerful that they had to seal her away. With a focused gaze, the mage starts putting the pieces together, understanding the gravity of the situation. It dawns on him that if she's from ancient times, it means not even the legendary hero of that era could defeat her. Daryun admits it's just a rumor, but the rise in vampire activity is a hard fact, and he urges them to be careful. Full of confidence, Flare assures him they'll be fine, and that there's no need to worry. The young woman gestures to her beloved, reminding her father that they have the strongest barrier master with them. With a smile, the young man agrees with his fiancée, accepting the praise without a hint of hesitation. He takes her hand and promises he won't let any harm come to her, vowing to destroy any obstacle in their path. With a glint in his eyes, he shows his determination, swearing to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. Daryun worries about the immortal foe but trusts that the mage's power will be more than enough. The protagonist states with conviction that when it comes to protecting someone, he is second to none. With a relieved smile, the girl's father finally asks the mage to take good care of his daughter. Just then, the girl reappears with a mountain of luggage, apologizing for taking so long to pack. The young man complains she's brought too much, but Flare insists they need it all, leaving him wondering how they'll carry it. With a smile, his fiancée tells the mage to work his magic, and he prepares to use one of his spells. He activates the barrier transformation into support form number 5 to store everything. His storage magic activates, and all the luggage dissolves into particles of light. Daryun is amazed by the power of the spell, and the young man says that's not even the half of it. He explains that besides attack, defense, and support, he also possesses secret techniques. Flare then declares that with Rikudo, they're perfectly safe, as no vampire could be a match for him. With everything packed, the protagonist gets ready to depart, saying goodbye to Daryun one last time. The girl's father watches them go with a proud smile, preparing for the final farewell. Our hero bows deeply, thanking him for everything, and the older man wishes them good health on their journey. Not far away, under the pale moonlight, the mage asks where they should head next. Flare suggests the neighboring empire, a meritocracy where even commoners can rise to nobility. With a smile, he agrees to the idea, and the two set off toward their new life together. But as they walk through the forest, the young man asks his beloved to step inside a barrier for a moment. The young woman is confused, but he simply insists she do as he asks. Now enclosed in a barrier of light, the girl asks what's wrong and what's going on. He shouts an urgent warning that enemies are closing in on them very fast. At that moment, a shower of red stakes rains down from the sky, but the barriers easily defend the couple. With a calm expression, the protagonist observes the assault from within his magical protection. The two remain completely unharmed inside their barriers as a sinister voice echoes through the trees. Out of nowhere, a woman with white hair and a red dress materializes, greeting the two humans. The mage identifies her as a vampire, and she confirms she is the legendary Queen of the Night. With a wicked grin, she says she smelled something delicious and is looking for a midnight snack. Wasting no time, he activates the barrier transformation into attack form number 1 to counter. A shower of light projectiles called Star shoots forcefully toward the vampire. The queen is taken aback, as physical attacks aren't supposed to work on the undead like her. With a stern look, the mage warns her not to interfere with his new beginning alongside Flare. The enemy shrieks at him not to underestimate her, but he replies that she shouldn't underestimate a barrier master. He then introduces himself as the one and only court mage, declaring his iron wall will be her opponent. A cruel smile spreads across the queen's face as she spots the mage's weak point and locks her gaze on Flare. The protagonist tells his beloved to wait quietly in the barrier, promising that no one will lay a hand on her. With a determined nod, the young woman agrees and wishes him good luck in the coming battle. Taking his position in front of the barrier, he prepares to protect the woman he loves, no matter the cost. The vampire scoffs that his techniques are odd, but ultimately, they're just cheap parlor tricks. She then begins to float into the air, unleashing a powerful and dark aura of energy. The plants around her start to wither and die, a sign that she's using an energy drain. In moments, all the vegetation in the forest begins to shrivel from her deadly ability. The enemy reveals she will absorb all life in the vicinity to completely restore her strength. But when her attack subsides, she sees the mage standing inside his barrier completely unaffected. The queen is left utterly shocked and speechless to see her technique had absolutely no effect. She demands to know how he survived, and the mage explains it was thanks to the barrier he activated. In sheer desperation, the vampire screams that barrier magic is preposterous and that this is impossible. She can't comprehend how he is unharmed, and the mage prepares to reveal the secret of his barrier. The protagonist explains his barrier blocks any attack, launched with the intent to cause harm. The vampire is incredulous, having never heard of a magic so absurdly powerful. With a cold gaze, our hero tells her to remember that well before her fast-approaching end. Next, the mage forms a hand sign, beginning to prepare a new attack to finish her off for good. Various geometric shapes of light materialize around him, showcasing the power of his next spell. Feeling the immense pressure, the queen realizes the situation is becoming dire, and that this is very bad. A wave of energy blasts toward the enemy, forcing her to retreat from the attack. To defend herself, the vampire unleashes her full power, revealing a pair of massive bat wings. Our hero watches the transformation, noticing her wings seem to be made of pure blood. She confirms his suspicion, stating her power is blood manipulation, a dangerous and lethal technique. With a furious roar, the enemy commands the human to perish and launches a crimson attack his way. The queen announces the name of her deadly technique, Blood Thread, meant to destroy the mage. The threads of blood surge forward, but Rikudo activates a containment barrier to shield himself from the blow. Inside his protection, the young man remains perfectly calm, observing the vampire's attack unfazed. With a cruel smile, she tells him to stay put and wait to be pierced by her threads. But the mage activates his barrier transformation into defensive formula number 3 to fight back. He yells the technique's name, Explosion, and an intense light erupts from within his barrier. The explosion expands rapidly, successfully repelling all of the queen's blood threads. In utter shock, the vampire can't believe her blood threads were so easily pushed back. Her eyes glowing red with hatred, she glares at the mage, unable to process how her strongest attack failed. With a cry of pain, the queen is hurled backward by the force of the mage's energy blast. Wounded and bewildered, she refuses to accept that her most powerful attack was repelled so casually. She shrieks that her technique is the ultimate spear and demands to know what the young man just did. With a tranquil expression, our hero calmly explains he simply reflected her attack with his barrier. The vampire questions the word reflect, and he reveals he made the material of his barrier soft and pliable. Stunned, she cannot believe he can wield his magic in such a versatile and unconventional manner. The young man notices her body is already regenerating, a testament to the power of an immortal being. A mysterious voice then taunts the queen, asking why she's so out of breath during the fight. The voice continues, pointing out she's struggling against a mere human, and she screams that it's impossible. The enemy demands to know what he is, and the mage looks back at her with a confident smile before answering. He replies that he's just a defective mage who can only use barrier magic. Furious, the vampire screams at him not to lie, refusing to believe his words. She tells him not to underestimate her, as she hails from a noble lineage and cannot lose to a human. With a battle cry, she unleashes her power, and our hero watches her with a determined gaze. The enemy then activates a strengthening technique called blood doping to turn the tide. With it, she dashes forward at incredible speed, leaving a red trail of energy in her wake. The protagonist is startled by the vampire's sudden burst of speed and can barely react in time. With a cruel smile, she appears behind him, taunting that he can't use barriers at such close range. In the blink of an eye, the queen grabs him from behind, trapping him in a powerful embrace. Yet he remains calm as she prepares her secret art, Blood Drain, to deliver the final blow. With a wicked cackle, she declares she will drain his life, and that it will be over in a moment. The vampire claims his life force will shrivel away, but the young man notices he's still perfectly fine. She stares at him with wide, disbelieving eyes, unable to understand why her deadly technique failed. The queen shouts, asking how he conjured a barrier in such a tight space, but he calmly says he's already using one. The protagonist tells her to look closer, and a faint aura of light begins to glow around his body. He reveals his barrier transformation, Defensive Formula 5, which creates a suit of invisible armor. In total disbelief, she stares at him and asks if he's truly human to possess such power. Desperate, the enemy pulls back and spreads her wings, attempting to escape the dangerous situation. With that, she soars into the sky, promising to finish him the next time they cross paths. But as she tries to flee, the vampire collides with an invisible wall, realizing her path is completely blocked. Rikudo reveals his auxiliary Formula 6, the bird cage, and informs her there won't be a next time. With a grave expression, the mage declares he will destroy her right here and now, trapping her in the cage of light. He then apologizes, stating he is going to seal her away, and the queen is horrified by the word seal. The young man explains that since she's immortal and can't be put down, he will seal her very existence. At this, the protagonist extends his hand, preparing to activate his sealing magic. With a focused gaze, our hero concentrates his power to end the threat once and for all. The enemy understands everything now, realizing he must be a descendant of those who sealed her in ancient times. She suddenly recalls that this was the one and only weakness of the immortals, their natural enemy. In a full-blown panic, the vampire screams as she refuses to be sealed again, having just been freed. With a final, desperate cry, she is consumed by the light of the seal, given no chance to escape. With a shout, our hero activates his secret art, known as Malevolent Spirit Seal. When the brilliant light fades, the sealing is complete, and only a single silver cross remains where she stood. From inside her barrier, Flare watches it all unfold, a look of profound relief on her face, finally safe. The young woman rushes to his side, praising him for his incredible feat of sealing a legendary vampire. With a confident smile, the mage accepts the compliment from his beloved, feeling a surge of pride in his accomplishment. His mind then drifts back to the past, when his master told him the girl was actually a child of the heavens. A young Rikudo had asked what that meant, and the woman replied that she was a special existence. She explained that because of this, all manner of monsters would be drawn to her, seeking her power. His master then tasked him with the solemn mission of protecting the young woman from all threats to come. The boy asked if she couldn't stay to help, but the woman told him it was impossible. The master revealed she had her own duties to attend to and could not remain by Flare's side. With that, the woman ordered Rikudo protect the girl until the end of his days, and perhaps even beyond. Back in the present, the couple gazes at each other with looks of deep affection and trust. Under the moonlight, Flare praises him once more, telling him he's truly amazing for what he just did. The young woman comforts him, saying it doesn't matter what the prince said, everything is going to be alright now. She promises to always stay by his side, to make sure his power is recognized by everyone. Deeply moved by his beloved's words, the young man simply thanks her for her endless support. He then asks if he can scout the area, as something nearby has been making him feel uneasy. The young woman agrees, and the mage steps away to investigate the source of his disquiet. Flare watches her beloved depart with a tranquil and admiring expression. On the forest floor, the silver cross that sealed the vampire gleams under the moonlight. Cautiously, the protagonist approaches the object and picks it up to examine it more closely. He then calls out to the queen, stating he knows perfectly well that she can still hear him. A faint groan of pain emanates from the small cross, confirming that she heard him. Rikudo hears the enemy's voice in his mind, slightly confused by what she's saying. The vampire mentally screams that she can't believe she lost to a mere human. She continues her dramatic performance, lamenting her defeat at the hands of an inferior life form. Having no patience for the theatrics, our hero simply asks her to wait a second. With that, he channels his magic into the silver cross, causing it to glow with an intense light. The light grows brighter and brighter, enveloping the entire object in a bluish energy. Suddenly, a massive explosion of light illuminates the entire forest for a brief moment. Out of the light, a small girl with white hair dressed as a maid appears before him. The young vampire wonders aloud how her mistress managed to manifest outside the seal. The mage explains he loosened the seal a little, a statement that leaves the girl confused. He reveals that all her power as a vampire is now sealed within that small cross. Rikudo states he brought her back because he has some important questions for her. But the former queen refuses to answer a human, glaring at him with a look of pure contempt. Wasting no time, he uses his containment magic, forcing another scream of pain from her. He threatens her, saying he can either lock her back in the cross or toss her into the depths of the ocean. Desperate, the vampire yields, promising not to challenge him and begging to remain free. The young man then extends his hand, releasing a bit of his magic to calm the agitated vampire. Breathless, the young woman bemoans her humiliation, forced to submit to a mere human. Even in surrender, she tries to resist, but the mage uses his containment spell to ensure her obedience. Finally, she gives in completely. He asks for her name, but she refuses to share such vital information. Rikudo threatens her again, and terrified, the vampire reveals her name is Carmilla Vlad Tepes. With a smile, he introduces himself as Riku, a name that seems to surprise the small girl. Carmilla accuses him, asking if he feels no shame interrogating a young girl like herself. He scoffs, pointing out she's far older than she looks, and asks about the noble blood she mentioned. The vampire explains it refers to her clan of true vampires, and he asks if there are others. With a serious expression, the young woman confirms that there are, and she is not the only one of her kind. The protagonist calls her pathetic, and she explodes, calling him a freak and blaming her loss on that. Carmilla's tantrum continues as she insists he can't be human to have sealed a queen all by himself. With a calm demeanor, the mage ignores the little one's drama and simply affirms that he is human. The vampire throws herself to the ground, screaming that he's infuriating and that he's the weak one. He then asks what the other vampires are plotting, and she reveals that the ancient seals are beginning to break. Thoughtfully, the young man wants to know why her seal was the first to shatter. She explains she drank the blood of a barrier master, absorbing his power to escape her prison. Surprised, Rikudo asks if she can now use barriers, and she confirms she can, but not on his level. The mage then asks his final question: does she know the other sealed vampires? A wicked smile spreads across the small girl's face as she confirms she does, since they are all from the same clan. The vampire looks at him shocked, unable to guess what he plans to do with her. She asks what he's thinking, and the mage points directly at the small vampire. Under the moonlight, he issues a command. Carmilla Vladteps is to become his servant from this moment forward. He restates his offer, demanding her knowledge of the noble blood in exchange for her freedom. Furious, the vampire refuses, but the young man activates his containment magic to silence her protests. The small girl cries out in pain once more, feeling the full force of our hero's magic. The seal on the silver cross glows brightly, a reminder that he can imprison her at any moment. Rikudo holds the cross, warning her with a grave look that this is not a simple proposal. He then declares with conviction that the decision has already been made. She has no choice in the matter. Completely defeated, the young woman calls him a monster and a demon for his cruel tactics. With a smile, the mage replies that coming from a vampire, he'll take that as a compliment. With no fight left in her, the small girl asks why he needs her so badly anyway. The young man explains that with other vampires on the loose, it's best to have all the knowledge he can get. She tries to refuse again, but he threatens her with the eternal seal, and she immediately apologizes. He shushes her, not wanting Flare to overhear, and she suggests they use telepathy instead. Our hero walks back to his beloved, and the young woman asks if everything is alright. He affectionately ruffles the girl's hair, and she smiles, relieved to have him back. He assures her there were no issues, and the young woman is happy to hear that he's okay. With a radiant smile, the girl pulls him into a tight hug, showing her immense relief. But during the embrace, the vampire detects a different scent, and says that now she understands everything. In her thoughts, the vampire wonders if the girl could possibly be from that mysterious bloodline. Our hero then prepares for their departure, activating one of his secret barrier techniques. Using the technique creation of all things, he conjures a carriage and invites Flare to climb aboard. Just then, the small vampire shouts for him to wait, and the mage asks why she's making such a racket. She demands to know how the carriage appeared, and his answer, that he made it with a barrier, leaves her stunned. The young man explains he can create pseudo-atoms with his barriers to generate any matter he desires. The vampire freaks out, insisting that's not simple at all and that he's a total anomaly for being so abnormal. Gazing up at the moon, the young vampire screams that our protagonist is completely and utterly insane. And so, with a very loud vampire now as his servant, the duo's journey truly began. With a legendary vampire as a familiar, riding in a carriage made of barriers, they set off into the unknown. The mage could control everything he created, so the journey would be a private one for the couple, no driver needed. Inside the carriage, he asks his beloved if she's really that fond of the little things she's petting. As it turns out, the journey was for two people, plus one small animal companion. Flare continues to stroke the little creature, who doesn't seem to be enjoying the attention very much. The truth is, that little black cat was none other than the queen of the night, Carmilla Vladteps herself. This was because she wouldn't stop complaining about being confined to the small silver cross. So, the mage used a barrier to create a cat's body, allowing the vampire a way out. Flare asks where he found the kitten, and Rikudo lies, claiming it was an abandoned stray. Taking pity on it, the girl decides they'll keep the animal, an idea that infuriates Carmilla. Watching the scene unfold, our hero thinks with a grumpy expression that he's incredibly jealous. The cat telepathically scolds him, saying now is not the time for jealousy, as there's trouble outside. He alerts Flare to the commotion and decides to investigate, but she insists on going with him. The two of them exit the carriage and are confronted by the sight of several knights' bodies on the ground. They survey the scene, noting that all the knights are down and heavily wounded. One of the soldiers is propped against a tree, writhing in agony. Flare is shocked by the sight, commenting on how terrible it is to see so many people hurt. Amidst the chaos, one of the fallen men begins to scream for healing potions. With a desperate look, the group's leader orders his men to bring every potion they have. Rikudo simply observes the entire situation in silence, his expression serious and focused. He then turns to his beloved, telling her their journey might be slightly delayed. With a determined nod, the young woman agrees, saying she'll also help in any way she can. Our protagonist turns to the injured, his eyes focused and ready for action. With that, he approaches a fallen female knight and asks if she's doing alright. The young man introduces himself as a traveler and offers his help, explaining he knows some healing arts. The knight is relieved, saying any help is welcome as many others are severely injured. The mage understands, but then he notices something odd about the warrior before him. He points out that she herself is wounded and asks what happened to her left arm. The woman reveals the injury was caused by a massive and powerful enemy. She explains they were hunting a ferocious beast, but the creature fought back, and she lost her limb in the struggle. Cradled in Flare's lap, the small vampire cat watches the scene unfold with a mischievous smile. Flare notices the cat is trembling and asks the little one what's wrong. Filled with fear, the vampire thinks to herself that this mage is truly terrifying and far too powerful. Rikudo then approaches the knight, telling her he will treat her wounds first. The woman thanks him but says it's impossible to restore a lost arm, at which point he surprises her. With a shocked expression, the warrior doesn't understand as he prepares his barrier transformation. Using auxiliary formula number 2, he activates the healing, and a bright light envelops the knight. In an instant, the woman's arm completely regenerates, and she cries out, unable to believe her eyes. She flexes the new arm and calls it a miracle, thanking him because now she can hunt prey again. The two shake hands and our hero is confused by her use of the word prey. Angrily, the vampire cat realizes the woman was talking about her and her kind. The knight then shouts to her comrades that a famous healer has saved them, but the protagonist quickly corrects her, telling the woman he is not a healer. The other soldiers gather around, begging him to save all their fallen comrades. The mage prepares himself and activates his barrier expansion to heal everyone at once. With a great shout, our hero unleashes his healing power over a massive area. The knights are bathed in the light, and one of them is shocked as he watches his injuries vanish. Completely healed, the other warriors look down at their bodies, unable to comprehend the power they just witnessed. They all raise their arms in celebration of the miracle, with no idea what just transpired. One of the men proclaims that a god has appeared and gives thanks to the Temple of Healing for the divine aid. Feeling a bit awkward, the young man clarifies that he's not a god or a healer, but a barrier master. The knight is stunned, asking if that was truly barrier arts and how he managed it. The mage explains the barrier contains higher concentrations of oxygen and light magic, which maximizes natural healing. Even though she doesn't fully grasp it, she thanks him and asks what kind of beast they were hunting. With a serious look, the warrior warns him of a ferocious prey in the area, a powerful vampire. Our hero is surprised, and the woman confirms it's the terrifying Queen of the Night, also known as Nosferatu. A wicked smile appears. We see an image of a vampire with white hair and red eyes. At that moment, an image of Carmilla in her original form flashes, her face contorted with rage. Through gritted teeth, the small cat in Flair's lap reveals that she is, in fact, the queen they're talking about. The young man then questions how she could be so powerful, and the vampire retorts that she isn't weak. She clarifies that he is just overwhelmingly strong, and Rikudo informs them he has already sealed the Queen of the Night. The knight is completely floored by this revelation and asks if he's telling the truth. With a calm demeanor, our hero confirms it, and the woman asks for his name. He introduces himself as Rikudo Guardman, which leaves the warrior looking thoughtful. With a smile, the woman introduces herself as Saraj, captain of the prey hunters. The protagonist is surprised by the name and the title of the woman's hunting group. The cat telepathically explains they are specialists in vampire extermination. Rikudo is intrigued, commenting that he was unaware people with such a job existed. Saraj then makes a request, pleading with the mage to join her group of hunters. The young man declines the offer, and the woman asks why, since his power could help save the world. He smiles and replies that saving the world is a bit beyond his scope. He just wants to protect what he can reach. He glances at his beloved, thinking that he only wants to protect the small slice of happiness right in front of him. But the knight persists, imploring him to join the hunters, but he refuses once more. She doesn't give up, grabbing him firmly and shouting that they need him to hunt vampires. The woman continues her impassioned speech, saying they must protect the world together and that he must listen. Later, Flair asks him what his plan is, and he reveals he wants to become an adventurer. The young woman looks thoughtful, trying to understand her beloved's reasoning. She suggests that joining an organization would offer a stable income and a place to live. The mage explains that the prey hunters don't pay a single gold coin, even if you defeat a vampire. With a look of disdain, the vampire cat thinks it sounds like an exploitative organization and wonders how they even survive. He tells them it's a noble sense of duty that drives them, and Carmilla thinks they're a bunch of fanatics. Rikudo reveals he needs money to build a life with Flair and can't go back to his home country. Furthermore, as a defective mage dismissed from the royal court, he wouldn't be able to find a decent job. The cat understands now, that's why he chose the life of an adventurer, where skills are all that matter. He then confirms he's never actually been an adventurer, having gone from the academy straight to the royal court. Carmilla questions him telepathically, asking if he'll really be okay on his own. He gets annoyed by her lack of faith and threatens her with one of his spells, which quickly scares her. The young man insists he trained with his master and has plenty of combat experience, so he'll be fine. He explains that it was his master who taught him the fundamentals of combat using barriers. Suddenly, our hero's stomach lets out a very loud growl, cutting the conversation short. Feeling hungry, the protagonist peeks through the carriage curtain to see what's outside. With a smile, he notes his timing is perfect as he spots a massive dragon flying nearby. The vampire is startled, asking why he's so calm in the presence of such a powerful monster. The young man replies that he's defeated plenty of them during his training, and that the creature will fetch a good price. With a grin, he gets ready and activates one of his barrier spells to attack the beast. His eyes focused, he thinks about the high price he'll get for selling the creature. Out of nowhere, a barrier materializes on top of the dragon, catching it completely by surprise. In an instant, the huge creature plummets from the sky, crashing hard onto the forest floor. Pleased with the result, our hero observes the scene with a satisfied smirk. The little vampire is shocked by what she just saw and asks what he did to the monster. The mage reveals he simply suffocated it with a barrier, and the cat loses her mind at his casual answer. He explains he just removed all the air from inside the barrier to choke out the giant creature. With a smile, the young man says using a barrier is all about controlling a domain, so it's only natural. The cat screams that it's not natural at all and that his barriers are just too absurd for her to comprehend. He explains that since he's never met another barrier master, he has no one to compare himself to. Hearing this, the vampire realizes his magic is so unique he doesn't even know how abnormal it is. She then asks why he didn't just use one of his attack techniques to bring the creature down. He explains that would have damaged the scales, and monster corpses are worth more when they're intact. The cat finally understands his reasoning, and the mage confirms it with a glance over the fallen monster. With the job done, he prepares to store the creature's body for a future sale. With a bright flash, he activates his storage magic, and the dragon vanishes from sight. The vampire cat screams in her mind for him to stop acting like this is all perfectly normal. She then asks how the dragon's body disappeared, and the mage says he stored it within his barrier. He explains that barriers are essentially a form of spatial magic, creating an entirely separate dimension. With a look of pure bewilderment, the little vampire tries to process this new piece of information. Our hero adds that the storage auxiliary formula allows him to place items within this space. Carmilla calls him a weirdo, but the young man says it's to be expected since he's a defective mage. The cat thinks that for him being abnormal is just another Tuesday, which is why his common sense is so skewed. Rikudo asks if being skewed means he's weak, but she thinks the opposite, he's far too strong. The vampire questions how he even reached that conclusion, and the mage says it's because everyone calls him defective. With an innocent look, the young man asks if vampires are naturally strong from the very beginning. Angrily, the cat shouts that in ancient times, they were feared as the most powerful species of all. He ignores the cat as she throws herself on the floor, having a full-blown tantrum for being disrespected by a human. Losing his patience, our hero simply picks up the vampire by her collar and lifts her from the ground. With a calm smile, he says they should get back to the carriage and continue their journey. But suddenly, the cat gets a powerful, bad feeling about something about to happen. With a frightened look, she warns that a large number of enemies are approaching, and fast. Out of the blue, several dragons fill the sky, and our protagonist looks up surprised. The massive creatures circle above, surrounding the mage, who continues to watch the scene calmly. But a smile spreads across his face as he calls the monsters a mountain of treasure, and gets excited. Shocked by his reaction, the vampire despairs, wondering what on earth he plans to do now. With a confident grin, he confirms he's going to take down every single monster right here. Clasping his hands together, he begins to prepare his spiritual barrier formula for the attack. With it, he conjures a massive birdcage-shaped prison, trapping all the flying creatures inside. The enormous dragons are caught completely off guard, finding themselves trapped within the cage of light. But suddenly, one of the dragons inside the cage begins to glow with a sinister energy. The protagonist immediately senses something is wrong, and the vampire asks what's happening. With a serious look, our hero reveals there's a very strange monster mixed in with the others. Abruptly, the creature shatters the barrier, and the cat screams that it's the first time that's ever happened. He explains that the larger the range of his barrier, the weaker it becomes over time. But, he adds, for the barrier to break it all means the enemy has to be incredibly strong. With a mighty roar, the zombie-like creature breaks completely free and glares at our protagonist with rage. The young man identifies it as a corpse dragon, and the vampire cat prepares to explain what that is. She reveals the creature as a twisted failure of the noble dragon race, one that received a vampire's blood. Carmilla adds that because of this, the monster became a zombie, trapped in a state of decay. The mage laments this, since a creature that rotten will be impossible to sell to anyone. He then turns to the cat and asks if the zombie monster is also immortal like her. The vampire confirms it's not, to which he replies that in that case, the creature is completely useless. With a serious expression, the young man joins his hands, preparing to use a new barrier spell. The cat shouts that the monster's flesh and blood will pollute the land and air around them. Fearfully, she adds that leaving the creature here would be a terrible idea for the future. With a determined look, our hero says he knows, and that he'll vaporize everything without leaving a speck of dust. He brings his hands together and begins to channel a bluish energy for his next spell. With wide eyes, the vampire cat has no idea what's happening in front of her. An intense light forms between his hands, and the little one asks what he's planning to do. The mage's eyes glow as he prepares to unleash one of his powerful ultimate arts. The light condenses into a sphere of dark, dense energy, humming with terrifying power. With a great shout, our hero unleashes his secret technique Void to annihilate the monster. The small sphere of dark energy flies toward the dragon at incredible speed. The zombie creature faces the attack head-on, with no chance of escaping its destiny. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic explosion of light and fire engulfs the entire forest. The little vampire cat is caught in the blast and sent flying by its sheer force. With a look of pure panic, the feline is tossed high into the air, with no control over her trajectory. With a desperate scream, the vampire is swallowed by the light of our protagonist's magic. When the light finally clears, the sky is empty, and the mage looks up with an air of satisfaction. A slight smile on his face, he seems quite pleased with the result of his powerful attack. The cat screams at him, and he explains it was his ultimate art, the Void Wave, which only confuses her more. The vampire questions the name Void, and the mage prepares to explain the principle behind his magic. He reveals that the world is made up of tiny particles known as atoms. The young man says that when you split these particles, an enormous amount of energy is released. With a calm expression, our hero adds that it's the same principle as an atomic bomb. The cat asks who told him that, and our hero admits that honestly, he doesn't really understand it himself. Shocked by this answer, the vampire can't believe he doesn't comprehend the power he just wielded. She continues, saying that even without understanding it, he can use a magic as destructive as that. Terrified, the little cat screams in her thoughts that the mage is far too dangerous for his own good. He agrees, admitting that not understanding the very technique you're using can be a bad thing. With a look of pure rage, the vampire prepares to yell at the young man once more. She then shouts it's not what she meant, and that what she meant is he's ridiculously strong. The cat demands to know what that destructive light was that simply wiped the entire landscape off the map. Sometime later, the couple arrives at the Meducas Empire, and the mage asks Flare which city they're in. The young woman reveals they've arrived in Saladias, a very large and lively city. She explains that the place serves as a gateway to the empire, which is why it's always bustling with people. We see the city is home to many different races, and the flow of people is immense. The young woman suggests they get a room at an inn first, then take care of his adventurer registration. With a smile, she holds up a list, saying she's already picked out a highly recommended inn. With that, the two make their way toward the lodging the girl has chosen for them. Once in the inn room, the young man becomes a bit tense about their current situation. His face turning red, he wonders if this is really okay, if everything is alright. It then dawns on him that his beloved has booked only a single room for the two of them. With a serious expression, the young woman looks at the protagonist, who is frozen at the door. She then asks if, by any chance, he doesn't want to share a room with her tonight. Flustered, our protagonist tries to explain himself, but can't seem to find the right words. With a playful smile, the young woman says she was just teasing and that she understands how he feels. She then opens her arms with a warm expression and beckons him to come closer on the bed. The young man looks at her for a moment before finally deciding what to do. In a sudden move, the young woman grabs his arm and pulls him onto the bed with all her strength. She hugs him tightly, telling him he needs to rest after such a long and tiring journey. Blushing, he agrees, thinking about how much has happened to get them to this point. Flare praises him for his hard work and tells him to get a good night's sleep for the day ahead. And with that, our hero drifts off to sleep peacefully in the arms of his beloved after a very long day. The next day at the guild, the vampire asks if he's planning on messing everything up again. Rakuto is confused by the question and asks what she means by messing everything up. Carmilla clarifies that he's just there to register, and nothing out of the ordinary should happen. With that, the protagonist heads towards the city's Adventurers Guild building. He steps inside and is amazed as the doors swing open for him automatically. The mage takes in the crowded hall, spotting the reception desk at the far end of the room. Arriving at the counter, he informs the receptionist that he'd like to become an adventurer. The young woman hands him a form and asks him to fill it out with his information. Using a quill pen, our hero begins to write his personal details on the paper. He hands the form back, stating his class is Mage, and as for his skills, the receptionist looks a bit uncomfortable and asks if he's certain that he only uses barrier magic. Rakuto confirms with a serious expression that it's the only type of magic he can use. The receptionist understands and informs him that, in that case, he'll need to take an exam. She explains that the Empire requires a registration test, but assures him it isn't difficult. The young woman says that first, they will measure his mana using a large crystal ball. He asks if the device might break, but she guarantees the crystal is unbreakable. She then explains the process is simple, he just needs to touch the crystal ball. After he does, the crystal will display his mana capacity as a number, like 150. The mage is impressed by the technology, having never seen anything like it in his former kingdom. Just then, a man in pink shows up and accuses him of bragging about his high mana level. Completely confused, our hero turns to the man and asks who he is. The man introduces himself as Kamas Diakagoya, a noble of the Empire. With an arrogant smirk, he boasts about his noble title and his great importance. Another adventurer questions him, and the noble rudely tells him to shut his mouth. He then turns back to the mage, mocking him for only using barrier magic and for showing off. Our hero asks the noble to leave him alone, but the man continues his provocations. Kamas calls him a defective product and says it's reckless for him to even try to become an adventurer. Fed up with the humiliation, the young man finally steps forward and touches the crystal ball. In an instant, the unbreakable crystal shatters into 1,000 pieces at the mage's touch. Both the receptionist and the noble are left completely stunned and speechless by what just happened. A slight smirk playing on his lips, our hero watches the scene with an air of calm confidence. The noble's jaw hits the floor as he screams in disbelief at what he just witnessed. He whirls on the protagonist, demanding to know what on earth he did to make that happen. The receptionist is in a state of shock, thinking it should be impossible for a mana crystal to break like that. Our hero thinks to himself that the tool simply couldn't handle his extraordinary mana capacity. With a calm expression, he recalls asking beforehand if the crystal could truly withstand his power. The young woman tells them it's time for the next part, and Rakuto asks how many tests are left. She holds up 2 fingers, revealing there's only a target practice and a practical combat match remaining. The The protagonist understands, realizing there are just 2 more steps until he's finished. Outside the guild, the receptionist begins to explain how the next exam will work. In a massive room, she points to a target and says the next phase is a test of accuracy. The young woman explains he must direct his attacks at it, and the target will measure his damage output. She adds that he'll pass the test as long as his score is above a certain specific value. Rikudo asks if it has to be a magical attack, and she says anything, even a bow and arrow, will work. With a curious look, our hero then asks just how much power that target can handle. The receptionist assures him it's reinforced with stabilization magic and is completely indestructible. The mage considers holding back, but the noble approaches, questioning his arrogant attitude. Kamas calls him a defective failure and scoffs at the idea of piercing a target with only barriers. Annoyed, the young man says it's a waste of his time, but he'll give him a demonstration anyway. The noble asks the mage if he's also there to register as a new adventurer. The man in pink shouts his confirmation, and Rikudo wonders why a noble would even bother. Losing her patience, the receptionist orders the man in pink to be quiet and stop all the yelling. With a calm demeanor, our protagonist simply watches the entire scene unfold, completely unfazed. The noble then shouts, preparing to show everyone the powerful flames of his purgatory. With that, he places his hands over a magic circle and summons a fire spirit for his attack. The energy gathers in his hands, forming a massive fireball for his final strike. With a bizarre movement, the noble prepares to kick his magic towards the target. He screams the name of the technique, and a huge fireball rockets toward its destination. In a flash, a gigantic explosion occurs, filling the entire room with thick, hot smoke. The receptionist is stunned by the sight, commenting on the incredible power the noble just displayed. The target reveals a score of 132, and the young woman congratulates him on the result. With an arrogant sneer, Kamas asks if Rikudo saw that, declaring it to be his true power. The receptionist then turns and informs our protagonist that it is now his turn to attack. With that, he begins to walk toward the target, and the young woman watches him with a worried look. Rikudo positions himself in front of the target, ready to demonstrate a fraction of his power. The young man says he understands and announces he won't be using his strongest technique, called Sky. With a single finger, he prepares his attack barrier and activates his technique called Star. A massive hole is blasted through the wall, and our hero calmly observes the destruction he just wrought. The supposedly indestructible target now has a gaping hole through its center and is completely ruined. The receptionist and the noble are left completely dumbfounded and speechless by the scene. A collective gasp rises from the crowd, unable to believe our protagonist's absurd power. The noble shouts that he used channel's magic, an elite technique reserved for only the most skilled mages. Our hero agrees, noting that it looked like the noble wasn't using an incantation either. The vampire thinks with shock, wondering if the mage used that technique knowing how advanced it was. The receptionist thinks to herself that using chantless magic is supposed to weaken a spell, not make it stronger. She's at a loss for words, seeing the broken target, and he points out that since he pierced it, of course it would break. Peeking through the hole, the young man finds it odd, as he thought he was holding back enough not to destroy it. The noble shouts furiously, calling him a liar and declaring the whole thing a massive fraud. He then demands to know how the mage attacked with a barrier, saying he refuses to believe it. Rikudo asks what it would take for him to believe, and the noble challenges him to a duel on the spot. The young woman interrupts, explaining that the third exam is a practical test against a guild adventurer. Hearing this, Kamas suggests he fight the defective mage, allowing the young woman to evaluate them both at once. The receptionist turns to Rikudo and asks if he's agreeable to this change in the test. Without a care, the young man accepts, calling it a waste of time but wanting to get it over with. The noble prepares himself, declaring he won't lose in a magical duel, and our hero acknowledges the situation. With everything settled, the receptionist steps back and signals the start of the combat. The man in pink begins his incantation, once again summoning the fire spirit for his attack. Meanwhile, our protagonist simply stands still, making a small hand gesture to prepare himself. With a furious roar, the noble conjures a massive fireball to obliterate his opponent. Rikudo remains calm, a slight smile on his face as he prepares his containment technique, Imprison. The noble scoffs at the defensive spell, asking if he really thinks he can stop his attack with that. With a grin, Rikudo replies that there's actually no need to stop the noble's attack at all. Angrily, the man in pink unleashes his strongest spell, launching it directly at our hero. He screams the name of the technique as a massive fireball hurtles toward the mage. The powerful fire attack travels at high speed, ready to slam into our protagonist. But suddenly, the fireball veers off course, and Kamas screams, shocked by this turn of events. In a complete panic, the noble watches his own attack boomerang back at him, screaming for it to stay away. With a cry of pain, the huge fireball explodes right in his face with its full power. Our hero simply watches the scene unfold with a very satisfied smirk. He then explains that instead of blocking the noble's attack, he simply used it to his own advantage. Lying defeated on the ground, the man in pink is utterly confused, asking what just happened. With a smile, the mage reveals he reflected the magic with a barrier and tells him to look around. Kamas finds himself trapped in a cage, and Rikudo explains this is his defensive form called Mirror. The noble is shocked, screaming that reflecting magic in that way is completely impossible. With a serious gaze, our hero states that it's possible if you truly master the art of barrier magic. Defeated, the man in pink collapses to the ground, unable to believe he lost in such a humiliating fashion. The receptionist praises the mage and confirms he's passed, but the young man asks for the final verdict. With a calm expression, he then turns and asks the young woman about Kamasa's status. Looking at the fallen noble, she reveals that, for some reason, he has also passed the test. Our hero stands over the defeated noble, commenting that he handles powerful spells quite well. In her thoughts, the vampire can't decide if the mage is a saint or a major threat to the world. The receptionist cheers with a bright smile, welcoming Rikudo to the Adventurers Guild. She adds that they welcome him from the bottom of their hearts for joining their ranks. A smile of satisfaction finally spreads across our hero's face, content to be an adventurer at last. He then gets a little embarrassed and asks the young woman her name, and she introduces herself as Ranka. With a warm smile, the young woman says she's very much looking forward to working with him from now on. The young man asks if he can sell some materials, revealing he defeated a monster on his way to the city. The young woman says that's fine and that they can assess it at the counter, but then she suddenly stops and says no. The mage is confused by her response and asks the young woman what she means by that. Running a hand through his hair, the young man says the monster's body probably won't fit inside the building. The receptionist is completely baffled by this statement, having no idea what he's talking about. He then says he'll just show her. An intense light suddenly begins to glow from his hand. Out of thin air, a massive dragon appears before them, and the young woman screams in pure shock. Speechless, the young woman turns to him and demands to know where on earth he pulled that creature from. He's surprised by her reaction and mentions things like magic bags and spatial magic. The young woman reminds him he only uses barriers, and the mage confirms you can do it if you put in the effort. She doesn't believe him, but the young man insists that if you really try, you can achieve it. The receptionist stares at him with a blank expression, looking as though she's given up on trying to understand him. Our hero notices her reaction and is a little confused by what's happening. As a crowd gathers, she praises the dragon, saying she's never seen a carcass in such pristine condition. She then asks how he managed it, and the mage reveals he simply suffocated it. The receptionist asks if he pushed it into the water or something similar to accomplish that. The mage says no and reveals he suffocated it with a barrier, leaving everyone with their mouths agape. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, questioning if that's really a beginner-level spell. He explains he just covered the enemy's face with a barrier and then removed all the air from inside. With a confused look, the young woman still doesn't understand a single thing the young man just said. Our hero then notices her confusion and wonders if he's only made things more complicated. The young woman admits that this is all a bit too difficult for her to fully comprehend. He apologizes but says he doesn't want her to think he obtained the creature through dishonest means. With a smile, Ranka says there's no problem, as they've all witnessed the new adventurer's incredible skill. She then looks at our protagonist but mentions that with a green dragon body that perfect. The massive green dragon lies on the city ground, looking as though it's merely asleep. With a sad expression, the receptionist reveals they can't purchase the creature, which shocks him. She explains the price would be astronomical, and their guild simply doesn't have the funds to pay for it. With a cry of pure frustration, our hero can't believe he won't be able to sell the dragon. The young woman bows apologetically, and he says it's his own fault for not considering the guild's size. Suddenly, an idea strikes the young man, and he says in that case he'd like to take on a quest. He asks if there's anything involving gathering, and the young woman points out a job to collect medicinal herbs. Without a second thought, our protagonist accepts the quest, saying he'll take it right now. The receptionist hands in the request form and directs him to head to the forest. She explains he must bring the form back along with the items to receive his grand reward. Leaving the guild, our hero descends the stairs to head out on his mission. Suddenly, a voice mocks him for taking an herb-gathering quest, and the young man turns around. With an arrogant smirk, Kamasa appears, calling him a defective product for accepting such a menial job. Rikudo turns to the noble and asks if he's managed to recover from their earlier encounter. The man in pink declares he's heading to the forest to hunt monsters, not pick herbs like some failure. He adds that since the mage can only defend, he shouldn't even set foot in the forest. Rikudo asks if he's worried about being outshined, but the noble claims it's just a friendly piece of advice. With that, the arrogant noble's party simply turns and walks away. The vampire, in her thoughts, wonders if that guy is a complete idiot for still underestimating the mage. Our hero then thinks to himself that people only see what they want to see. Unbothered by the noble, he says it's fine and that they'll just go collect the herbs. Outside the city, the mage prepares to head towards the forest for his quest. With a single leap, he activates a barrier and soars through the air at high speed to get there faster. The vampire is completely shocked and lets out a scream of pure fright at what just happened. With a gentle landing, the young man announces that they have finally arrived at the forest for their mission. A satisfied smile on his face, he seems quite pleased with the result of his aerial journey. Carmilla screams in her thoughts for him to stop acting as if this were all perfectly normal. She demands to know how he flew, and he replies that he used barrier magic to do it. In her mind, the little vampire screams that this is impossible to do with barriers. With her mouth wide open, the vampire cat can't believe it and screams that it makes no sense. With a calm expression, he says it's a simple principle, but the vampire understands none of it. To demonstrate, the mage bends down and picks up a small stone from the ground. He explains that a barrier is a point in space, and all you need to do is define its coordinates. With the barrier floating in mid-air, our hero then places the small stone right in its center. The stone also begins to float, and he explains that after this, you just have to move the barrier freely through the air. The young man reveals that by enveloping his body in a barrier, he can fly, and the cat thinks he's completely abnormal. Rikudo then says they should get to collecting the herbs, but the vampire doubts he can even identify any. In response, he creates a giant barrier and the cat asks what he's doing. Our hero then makes a hand signal, preparing to use yet another of his spells. Out of nowhere, the huge barrier of light begins to shrink, and the vampire is baffled by the situation. The magic then closes in completely, becoming the size of the young man with something trapped inside. With a mountain of herbs at her feet, the cat asks what all this is, and he says it's every herb they need. He reveals he created a numerical barrier that pushed out everything that wasn't a medicinal plant. The vampire is shocked to see only the target herbs remain, and the mage confirms his plan worked perfectly. With a snap of his fingers, he stores everything, and the cat thinks his idea was absolutely brilliant. She praises him for achieving so much with barriers, and he thanks her, saying they should head back. But suddenly a desperate scream for help echoes through the forest, startling him. With a serious look, our hero freezes, trying to hear the cry again. The scream continues, and the mage realizes he recognizes that voice from somewhere nearby. He then identifies it as the arrogant noble from the guild, confirming it's the same guy. The cat asks if he's really going to help the noble, and the mage takes flight, saying of course he is. She reminds him that the guy humiliated him, but Rikudo says that's no reason to leave him to his fate. With a smile, the vampire calls him a weirdo for his strange and unexpected kindness. She then praises him for being a good guy, and he thanks her, announcing he's finally found him. From the air, he spots the noble's party being chased by a giant boar through the forest. The monster closes in, and the noble screams in pure terror at the massive creature before him. In a complete panic, the man in pink screams endlessly as he sees the creature getting dangerously close. One of the noble's female companions turns and shrieks at the sight of what's happening. She declares she's getting out while she still can, and one of the other girls calls Kamas cruel for abandoning them. Angrily, he yells at them to shut up, proclaiming that his own life always comes first. But suddenly he runs face first into something and cries out at the unexpected impact. Our hero has trapped him in a barrier, calling him defective bastard and telling him to stay quiet. With a hand sign, he prepares to use one of his attack techniques to help the others. He then activates his barrier technique called Linked Bullet to save the girls. In an instant, the giant boar is launched into the air, along with one of the noble's companions. The monster squeals in pain as it's hit head on by the power of our hero's magic. Landing safely on the ground, the young adventurer asks if her companion is okay. The fallen girl expresses her thanks, and the mage approaches the two to check on them. With a smile, he tells her she can thank him later for saving her life. The adventurer is confused, but suddenly a roar thunders through the trees, and another creature rises with hatred. With a scream of panic, the noble stares at the new and gigantic threat that has just appeared. Before him stands the mighty Orc King, and Kamas recognizes him instantly. He wonders what a B-rank monster is doing here and screams that they are all doomed. Lying on the ground, the man in pink cries for his mother as the creature roars in pure fury. With a look of pure hatred, the enormous monster glares at our protagonist, ready to attack. The creature then leaps forward to strike, but the mage remains calm and completely unfazed. A confident smile on his face, our hero prepares to demonstrate his power once again. He activates his barrier, and numerous threads of blue light envelop the monster completely in mid-air. The creature is sliced into multiple pieces, and Kamas screams, shocked by the spectacle he just witnessed. The mage reveals his barrier transformation in the attack form known as Light Thread. Rikudo explains he simply made the barrier razor thin, and the noble sputters that a defective couldn't do that. Still trapped in the barrier, the man in pink refuses to believe the power of the mage he so thoroughly humiliated. With a serious look, our hero faces him, ready to impart a moral lesson. He says that if you believe nothing is possible, then you will truly never accomplish anything. Back in town, our protagonist approaches the guild and hears a strange commotion. He pauses, realizing the noise is coming from inside the adventurer's building. Inside, the guild is packed, and an adventurer is arguing with the receptionist at the counter. The man seems irritated by the situation, and the young woman looks exhausted by all the fuss. The receptionist spots our hero and calls out to him, a look of relief washing over her face. With a smile, she says his timing is perfect and asks if he managed to get the herbs. The receptionist confirms they need a large quantity of herbs, and our hero asks if they need help. The adventurer confirms they do, and the mage then asks for the exact amount required. Holding up one finger, the man reveals they need at least 100 kilograms of herbs. Stroking his chin, our protagonist considers the amount, appearing quite relaxed. Seeing his calm reaction, the man grows concerned and asks if that quantity is too difficult to obtain. With a smile, the young man reveals he has 500 kilograms, and the man shouts in pure shock. The receptionist is also stunned, and the mage admits he might have overdone it a bit while collecting. The adventurer asks if he really has that much, and the young man prepares to prove it. He then uses his magic, and the guild hall fills with herbs, prompting the man to ask for all of them. With a serious look, our hero agrees and asks if, by any chance, people were injured somewhere. The man confirms this, saying that near a town where an acquaintance of his lives, many people were hurt. He adds that they sent an urgent message requesting all available potions in stock. A glow emanates from his hand as the mage prepares to make an unexpected proposal. Rikudo then offers to go to the location himself and heal all the injured people. The adventurer is shocked and asks if he's a healer, but our hero immediately denies it. With a calm demeanor, the young man reveals he can use his barriers to heal people. The man understands this situation and says he will trust the mage with this important mission. With a smile, the adventurer says he believes in him, as he has a good eye for people. Our hero then looks at the man with a serious expression, ready to accept the mission. The adventurer shakes his hand, asking our protagonist to take good care of everything over there. The young man then asks for the location, and the adventurer reveals it to be the town of Itoi. Rikudo thinks for a moment and remembers that the town of Itoi is right next to his hometown, Miyoko. The man hurries, saying he's already prepared a carriage, but the mage tells him it's not necessary. Raising his hand, he prepares to use his magic, leaving the adventurer utterly confused. He reveals he's been there before and can fly to the city immediately, without any delay. The adventurer is stunned, asking if the mage can even use teleportation. With an intense flash, our hero prepares and vanishes from the guild in the blink of an eye. Shocked, the man exclaims that it's unbelievable, and that they are actually now in the city of Itoi. He then wonders just who this defective mages who can use such advanced magic. The adventurer praises him, saying his judgment didn't fail him in trusting the young man so completely. With a smile, our hero says they should hurry to help the injured people. He then turns with a determined grin, ready to head towards the wounded. But upon arriving at the scene, he's confronted by a sight of complete destruction and utter chaos. A massive horde of orcs is attacking the city, and adventurers are struggling to defend it. The furious green monsters attack relentlessly with their axes and sharp swords. With a serious look, our protagonist takes in the sheer number of orcs on the scene. Several adventurers are fighting bravely, but the number of monsters seems overwhelming. Our hero then realizes the situation is far worse than he initially imagined. With a worried expression, the adventurer says it's a full-blown monster parade in the city. The mage understands that hungry monsters often band together in large groups to hunt humans. The horde of monsters continues its relentless advance, and the situation looks increasingly desperate. A glow appears in his hands as our hero prepares to use his magic to help. He then creates a barrier and asks the adventurer to stay inside it for the time being. Frightened, the man asks what they're going to do, and the mage says he's going to end this. With a focused look, our hero prepares to unleash his full power once again. He extends his hand and creates a giant barrier, trapping all the monsters at once. The massive barrier of light encircles the entire horde of orcs, which continues its frenzied attack. One of the adventurers is shocked, asking what that barrier is that appeared out of thin air. With a hand signal, the mage activates the second phase of his spell with a serious expression. An adventurer tries to strike an orc, but his sword simply passes right through the monster. The warrior then realizes he can no longer land a hit on the creatures trapped within the barrier. Our hero then reveals that only they can pass through the barrier, the orcs cannot. From the outside, the adventurers watch as the monsters are completely contained by the light magic. An adventurer suggests they attack the monsters while they're trapped, but the mage says no. The adventurer is confused by this response and asks what he plans to do with the orcs. With a clenched fist, our hero prepares to use one of his most powerful techniques. The barrier begins to contract and the orcs inside start to feel immense pain. The barrier gets smaller and smaller, and all the monsters are crushed within the magic of light. One of the adventurers remarks on how brutal it is, noting that he's literally squeezing the orcs. Cheers erupt as everyone realizes that, thanks to the mage, they've all been saved from a certain end. The adventurer shouts with joy, giving thanks because everyone there was saved from the massive threat. With a calm demeanor, our hero simply observes the scene with a deep sense of satisfaction. Afterwards, everyone gathers in the city church to tend to the wounded and get some rest. Using his healing magic, the protagonist begins to help all those injured in the battle. The adventurers are shocked as they watch their wounds vanish in the blink of an eye. With everyone healed, the young man and his cat watch as the others celebrate their great victory. But our hero maintains a serious expression, knowing his mission is not yet over. Suddenly, a woman cries out in despair upon realizing one of her companions did not survive. She begins to weep uncontrollably, asking why of all people that person had to be taken. The mage and the vampire simply observe the tragic scene with serious, focused expressions. The adventurer then approaches and thanks the young man once again for all his help. The man says that if he hadn't been there, the situation would have been much worse for everyone. With that, the man suggests they head back to discuss the reward, but the mage declines. With a look of determination, our protagonist reveals that his work here is not yet finished. Utterly confused, the adventurer doesn't understand and asks what he means by that. The young man then gestures to the woman, who is still mourning the loss of her dear companion. He then shocks the man by revealing he has not yet revived the people who have passed on. Even the little vampire is stunned, wondering what on earth he's talking about. He confirms he can bring back the departed, and the cat can't believe what she just heard. With wide eyes, the little vampire asks if that's truly possible. With a serious look, our hero confirms that it is, leaving the vampire speechless. The little cat's jaw drops in complete shock, unable to process what she just heard. At this, she has a complete meltdown, screaming that it's impossible to bring people back like that. Just then, the little vampire collapses onto the church floor in sheer disbelief. Her tail twitching, the feline remains in a state of utter shock from the mage's revelation. She then turns and screams once more that bringing back the departed is absolutely impossible. But our hero looks at her calmly and reaffirms that it is, in fact, possible. He then adds that despite this, there are many restrictions on using the magic. With his hands clasped together, he begins to channel his energy, preparing to use a secret art. With a great shout, our protagonist activates his technique to construct a sacred realm. The vampire recognizes the power of purification, the strongest healing technique in existence. She then asks, shocked, if he just created a sacred domain where a deity could exist. The mage praises her for her knowledge, and the vampire retorts she hasn't lived for centuries for nothing. With this, she understands he's generating a version of the heavens to carry out his plan. She then realizes he's going to use this sacred space to summon a human soul. With a focused gaze, the young man announces that the adventurer's soul has finally returned to his body. He explains that now, all he needs to do is completely heal the wounded body. With a groan of pain, the adventurer begins to stir, slowly waking up in bed. He wonders aloud if he had passed on, and the woman embraces him tightly, crying tears of joy. Everyone is stunned to see the man alive, and the vampire contemplates the power to create such a domain. The vampire thinks that summoning a soul from the heavens is not something a mortal should be able to do. The young man then explains the restrictions, stating it only works if the person has just recently passed. He adds that without a body for the soul to return to, he can't do anything at all. Even so, the little vampire remains in shock, thinking he has transcended the realm of humans. Suddenly, all the adventurers he saved begin to bow before him, leaving the mage confused. A look of shock on his face, our protagonist doesn't understand this strange turn of events. The adventurer then shouts with conviction that it's now clear the young man is a god. The mage stands frozen in front of the church, unsure how to react to being called a divine being. Atop the church, the cross glows intensely, powered by the sacred domain he created. Feeling awkward, he tries to deny the accusation, insisting he's nothing of the sort. After resolving everything, our protagonist finally leaves the area to continue his journey. Far from the city, we see the mage walking alongside the small vampire in her human form. She turns to him and asks what his problem is, and the mage asks what she means. The vampire screams that one moment he's causing mass destruction, and the next he's reviving the departed with his power. She finishes by saying none of this is normal and demands to know what it takes to be like him. Unfazed by the little one's shouting, the young man continues to walk calmly down the road. He then replies that his master taught him, a revelation that surprises Carmilla. The protagonist explains that his master could also only use one type of magic, that of the null attribute. He lists the 6 elements of magic and says there is a 7th, which is the null attribute. Rikudo concludes by saying his barriers are of the null attribute, and his master taught him how to adapt them. The vampire then asks if his master is even stronger than him, and the mage surprises her with his answer. He confirms it calmly, and she asks who she is and where exactly she came from. The young man says he doesn't know her current whereabouts, but reveals his master's name is Lovemery. With wide eyes, the little vampire goes into a state of complete shock upon hearing that name. Rikudo turns, not understanding her reaction, and asks the young woman what's wrong. With a grim expression, she reveals that Lovemery is one of the 8 strongest mages in the world. She adds that the woman is known as the fearsome witch of the world, Lovemery. With a look of pure admiration, we see an image of our protagonist's powerful master. Rikudo is confused and asks which of the names is the real one, Witch or Sentinel. The vampire reveals that Sentinel of the Underworld was the nickname the vampires gave her. Carmilla explains that the woman watches over the land and departed with a watchful and powerful gaze. In doing so, the master ensures that wicked souls can never return to the surface world. We then see the imposing figure of the woman seated on a cliff in the shadowy underworld. Our protagonist's master stares at the horizon, her expression serious and brimming with power. The vampire reveals that Lovemery is the witch that all demonic beings fear the most. Her mouth agape, the little one finally understands the secret behind the young man's immense strength. With a smile, our hero confirms that if he was raised by her, it's only natural that he would be strong. He adds that his master was incredible, capable of defeating dragons with her bare hands. Looking a bit uncomfortable, the young man just says that a lot happened in his past. With a sad look, we see a memory of a young Rikudo crying in his master's arms. Dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, the little vampire cries, lamenting her fate of being captured by the Sentinel's disciple. Our hero looks at the young woman with a calm expression, unbothered by her drama. He tells her not to be sad, but Carmilla screams that he's the one responsible for all of this. After all the turmoil, the dust finally settles and a new day dawns in the city. With the merchant's problem resolved, our protagonist returns to the guild to prepare for his departure. He says goodbye to the receptionist at the counter, but a voice stops him before he can leave. The adventurer grabs his arm firmly, asking the mage to wait just one more moment. Not understanding, the young man turns and asks the man what he wants with him. The young woman says she's going to fetch the guild master, and the protagonist asks if they need something. She reveals the master wishes to speak with him, but Rikudo says he's exhausted from his mission. With a wary look, he asks to postpone the conversation for another day, saying he just wants to rest. Seeing the young woman's desperate expression, he feels bad and apologizes for his selfish attitude. His hand glowing, he uses a barrier to gently push her away so he can finally leave. With a smile, the mage tells her to save his meeting with the guild master for next time. In a flash of light, he vanishes, leaving the receptionist standing alone in the middle of the hall. The young woman is left speechless, staring blankly at the spot where he just was. Now outside, the young man complains that too much has happened, and that he's completely drained. With the vampire cat by his side, he finally has a moment of peace to collect his thoughts. He begins to recall everything that's happened since his registration exam. He also remembers his first mission and the powerful magic he used to save everyone. He recalls even using his secret art in the city of Itoi to rescue everyone. Completely exhausted, he finally heads back to the inn to get some much-needed rest. But suddenly, Flair shouts his name with a joyful smile upon seeing him arrive safely. The young man is welcomed with a warm embrace from his beloved, who had been waiting for him. He thinks that as long as he has her smile by his side, he can overcome any challenge. With a smile, the protagonist says, "I'm home," and feels his fatigue melt away completely. The young woman then gives a warm welcome to the little cat, and our hero is startled by the scene. The small vampire glares at him with a look of pure hatred for having been ignored. After calming down a bit, the couple sits on the bed to have a proper conversation. Flair comments that he was gone for quite a while, and our protagonist looks a bit thoughtful. He says a lot of things happened, and she praises him for the good work he did that day. The young man reveals that he met all sorts of people during his hectic day. He thinks about the people who recognized his worth and those who trusted him with the mission. With a smile, he remembers the man who believed in his abilities without a moment's hesitation. But he also remembers the strange man who humiliated him and almost ended up in a very bad spot. The mage thinks he was worried about leaving the country, but now he feels confident as an adventurer. With this, he says that if he becomes a full-fledged adventurer, their income will stabilize. With a determined look, he faces his beloved and promises to make her very happy. The young woman turns completely red, left speechless by our protagonist's heartfelt declaration. A shy smile spreads across her face. She seems incredibly happy with her beloved's promise. In a burst of joy, the young woman throws herself into his arms. The two then share a tight, affectionate hug in the middle of the inn room. She tells him he was wonderful and that simply being by his side is enough to make her happy. With a smile, the young woman asks him not to overdo it and to take it a little easier on his quests. Blushing, the young man agrees with his beloved, saying he understands her message loud and clear. And so, the two lovebirds remain in their embrace, enjoying a moment of pure happiness. Meanwhile, the little vampire simply watches the scene from a distance with a serious expression. But suddenly, the girl shifts, and the vampire cat senses something strange coming from her. The little vampire then rubs her face with her paw, looking a bit drowsy. The girl continues to stir, and the vampire cat doesn't take her eyes off her for a second. With a suspicious look, the feline wonders if it's just her imagination. A few days pass, and we see the Adventurers Guild building once again. The receptionist informs him that today he will finally meet the master, which surprises the young man. He assumes it's about the monster outbreak, but then notices the young woman's odd expression. With a serious face, the young woman looks at our protagonist, her expression unreadable. The young man asks if it's about a job, and she confirms they wish to request something of him. With a sigh, our hero seems a bit let down to learn that it's just another job. He then turns to the receptionist and confirms that he understands the situation perfectly. Suddenly, a mysterious voice calls out to him, asking if he is indeed the famous Rikudo. The voice invites him to sit, and he prepares himself for the important conversation. In the office, the guild master begins to explain the situation to our protagonist. With a serious look, the man reveals that a mysterious ruin has suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The mage is intrigued, and the master says the creatures inside look human but are not. He explains that a mysterious monster has emerged from the ruin, and they are essentially moving bodies. With a focused gaze, our hero understands they are dealing with living corpses. The man confirms they have appeared in large numbers, and that there is also a leader among them. Rikudo asks if they've already fought the leader, but the master says that no attack has worked against it. He adds that they even sent S-rank adventurers, but they all returned unsuccessful. The young man then considers the possibility of it being an immortal being and thinks of his servant Carmilla. The image of a glowing cross flashes in his mind, and he realizes the possibility is very high. At this, he concludes that if the creature can't be defeated, the only remaining option is to seal it. With a smile, he asks if, by any chance, he might be the right person for this particular mission. The guild master recalls that he single-handedly resolved a difficult mission just the other day. For this reason, he believes Rikudo can solve this problem and is making a direct request to him. With a confident smile, the mage understands the request and accepts the mission without a moment's hesitation. The master is both shocked and overjoyed to see the young man accept the job. But our hero cuts him off, stating that he will expect to be properly compensated for his work. The man agrees, and the scene shifts to the exterior of the Adventurers Guild building. In an instant, the protagonist touches down in a village to begin his new mission. Suddenly, a mysterious voice questions him, asking what he's doing in this place. The voice continues, demanding to know why he has come to this specific village. Our hero reveals that a dungeon has appeared nearby, and he was hoping to get some information from the locals. With a serious look, the young man faces his mysterious opponent, ready for whatever may come. Out of nowhere, Carmilla senses a deathly presence, and we see an image of the cross-shaped seal. A white-haired man named Hibiki is caught by surprise by an attack made of light. Numerous beams of blue light slice through the air, assailing the man with incredible speed. The light continues to shine intensely as the powerful attack rages on. As a result, the man named Hibiki is trapped within a geometric barrier of light. His hand glowing, he appears to be using some kind of magic to defend himself against the blow. Rikudo reveals there are 2 children in danger, and the vampire screams at him not to stop. Rikudo then explains he used his Hibiki-type barrier to detect all living beings in the area. From this, he wonders if there are truly only 2 living people in the entire village. Our hero thinks that if they are the only living humans left, the situation is grim. Just then, the white-haired man looks at him, questioning his strange way of speaking. He then reveals with a dark expression that there are also those here who are not among the living. The protagonist is confused by this answer, not understanding what he means. Suddenly, a zombie appears from thin air, letting out a terrifying scream in front of the 2. The creature continues to shriek, and our hero simply watches the scene with a calm expression. A confident smile on his face, he seems completely unafraid of this new threat. In her human form, the little vampire is completely shocked by the scene unfolding before her. The zombie then begins to shamble slowly and relentlessly toward our protagonist. At that moment, another creature appears, and Carmilla screams in pure panic at the sight of 2 monsters. Hibiki then shouts for him to run, warning that if he gets bitten, he'll instantly turn into a zombie too. Furious, the vampire screams for the mage to finish the creature before it's too late. But he surprises her by saying he's not going to destroy the zombie, which leaves her very confused. The monster closes in on Hibiki, and the white-haired man screams in pure terror. Out of nowhere, Rikudo appears and catches the creature with his bare hands just before its final attack. With a serious and determined look, he stops the monster from being able to attack the man. The impact causes the creature's teeth to shatter and fall to the ground. The zombie is left stunned, its mouth hanging open, unable to comprehend what just happened. Our hero reveals he used a barrier key to construct something unexpected in that moment. Hibiki is shocked, saying that barrier arts require immense concentration to work. He adds that a spell with that kind of power isn't something one can cast instantaneously. The zombie then seems to understand the situation and, with a smile, says that everything is alright. The mage extends his hand and tells the creature to wait, as he is going to heal it now. With his hand glowing, he prepares to use one of his healing spells on the creature. An intense light envelops the zombie, which stands still, not understanding what's happening. Hibiki recognizes the magic, saying it's the same one that healed those attacked by the orcs. With a smile, the young man confirms the magic is similar but has its own differences. The vampire screams that zombification isn't a disease and can't be cured, yet he just did it. Angrily, the little vampire screams, wondering what on earth just happened. Out of the blue, the zombie's hand begins to glow, and the creature transforms back into a normal human. The woman then stands up confused and wonders why she's in this place. Completely shocked, the vampire freaks out, unable to understand what's going on. Our hero explains he simply reversed the flow of time within the barrier to cure her. Hibiki asks if he can really do that, and the young woman stares at the mage, still not understanding. Furious, the vampire prepares to have another one of her fits of rage at him. She then screams that he is incredibly irritating, and that she can't stand this situation anymore. Unbothered, our hero walks towards the entrance of the mysterious dungeon. With a serious look, he approaches the stone door to begin his new mission. Inside, he encounters 2 more zombies shuffling slowly in his direction. The creatures let out a terrifying scream and prepare to attack the mage. With a glow in his hand, he uses his healing magic on both monsters at once. The light from the spell gently pushes the 2 creatures back without truly harming them. Now cured, the 2 thank him, and the mage asks what happened to them in here. They say they aren't sure, and that their memories are very hazy right now. The woman recalls seeing a massive door deep inside the dark dungeon. She adds that after that, her memory simply went completely blank. The other man corroborates her story, saying the same thing happened to him. Stroking his chin, the protagonist thinks about the door and understands the whole situation. With a focused gaze, our hero looks down the dungeon corridor with determination. He then continues his journey, walking toward the depths of the dark dungeon. Carmilla calls him a work of art, and the cross on her shoulder begins to glow faintly. The vampire complains that he's healing all the zombies and taking them back to their homes. With a suspicious look, she studies the mage, unable to understand his true intentions. He explains he couldn't make her the sole exception and that it wasn't much trouble. Angrily, the little vampire shouts that teleportation requires an immense amount of effort. She continues her lecture, saying it's an advanced and very powerful form of magic. With that, she asks how he's able to use such a spell with so much ease. He reveals that a barrier is essentially spatial magic and explains the principle behind it. He explains that with this logic, he creates one space here and another at the destination, and then connects them. This allows him to move between 2 points in an instant, but the vampire still doesn't get it. She then compares him to Thumb, and our hero is confused, asking who she's talking about. The little one starts to talk about the vampires of her clan, but then decides to say no more. Our protagonist insists she tell him, but the young woman covers her mouth, refusing to speak. Terrified, she reveals that if she speaks their names, her life will surely be forfeit. He becomes thoughtful about those people, while the little one remains very frightened. With a smile, he then deduces she's likely referring to high-ranking vampires. At that moment, more zombies appear, shuffling slowly towards the two adventurers. The creatures let out an eerie shriek and prepare to attack the mage and his servant. With a serious look, the protagonist thinks that sooner or later, he'll uncover the truth. With that, the two continue on their way and finally reach a new area of the dungeon. Our hero realizes this must be the deepest floor and that the door is right in front of him. He then faces the massive wooden door, confirming it's the same one the villagers mentioned. With a determined look, the mage prepares to enter, saying they should get this over with. Without hesitation, the two step into the mysterious room to see what lies within. Upon entering, they find a throne room with a woman seated on the throne, flanked by several guards. The woman on the throne is surrounded by 2 female attendants and looks down on the two with an air of superiority. A slight smile on her face, the mysterious woman seems quite unbothered by their arrival. Our protagonist looks at her and deduces she must be one of the high-ranking vampires. Carmilla is shocked and asks how he knows, but he says it was just a hunch based on the way she carries herself. The blue-haired woman looks at the young man with a serious expression and confirms she is an elite vampire. He then notices that her mana flow is far greater than Carmilla's. Just then, the zombified adventurers begin to move and groan in pain, readying themselves for battle. The creatures then walk slowly toward the two, their faces devoid of any emotion. The vampire senses a sinister aura from them, and the mage agrees, which irritates her with his calmness. We see the creatures are armed with spears and bows, ready for combat at a moment's notice. Other zombies also wield swords, preparing to attack the mage and his servant. With that, all the zombies surround the pair of adventurers, cutting off any chance of escape. Our hero recognizes them as masters of their craft and asks the vampire if she's the one controlling them. With an intense glow, our hero creates a barrier, blocking the zombies' attack. The sword of one of the monsters flashes brightly as it clashes against the mage's protection. The vampire shouts that they are martial arts masters wielding divine artifacts. Rikudo just replies with a huh, and Carmilla gets annoyed by his nonchalant reaction. He says it doesn't matter what kind of weapons they use, his course of action remains the same. His sword glowing, the mage says he's going to give the enemies a little payback. With a bright flash, he unleashes a wave of energy, sending all the zombies flying. The creatures cry out, their eyes glowing, not understanding what just happened. The vampire on the throne simply observes the entire scene with a serious and focused expression. Carmilla says his barrier is a cheat, and our hero asks if she really thinks so. He argues that if they can use incredible weapons, he can use an incredible suit of armor. The little vampire concedes his logic, but still seems a bit suspicious. With a smile, the vampire on the throne seems quite pleased with what she's witnessing. She praises him, saying he seems to have a sliver of skill for a mere human. The two leaders then stare each other down, their expressions serious, both ready for combat. The woman asks what a human is doing here, and he reveals he has come to seal her away. A smile of pure mockery spreads across the vampire's face. She seems amused by the young man's audacity. She calls him an amusing human and asks if he's aware that she belongs to a superior species. With a determined look, our hero says it doesn't matter whether she's superior or not. The vampire picks up a golden scale, calling him an amusing insect for his courage. With that, she announces she will play with him for a while to pass the time in her dungeon. The woman then introduces herself as Libra, the vampire of the scales, putting everyone on high alert. She grips the golden scale firmly, preparing to use her abilities. With a battle cry, the vampire commands her servants to advance on the mage and his companion. She then orders them to finish the young man, and the horde of zombies surges forward to attack. The monsters, their eyes glowing, run relentlessly toward the pair of adventurers. One of the creatures lets out a terrifying scream as it prepares to engage the mage in combat. The horde of zombies then closes in quickly, ready to overwhelm the two of them. The monsters with white, hungry eyes continue to advance without a hint of fear. With a bright flash, our hero creates a barrier, protecting both himself and the vampire. The vampire notes that even though they're blocked by the barrier, the zombies don't stop their assault. She complains that the monsters' actions are irrational and that they're getting nowhere. Our hero then says he'll just attack their master directly, and that will be that. And so the horde of zombies with glowing red eyes continues its relentless advance. The mage then prepares to shout the name of his next barrier technique. He activates Ricochet and an intense light sends all the zombies flying backward. The creatures are thrown back and glare at the mage, their eyes glowing in the darkness. With their mouths agape, the monsters prepare to charge our protagonist once more. The vampire says this isn't getting them anywhere, and that they are essentially trapped. Rikudo replies that if that's the case, he will simply attack the enemy's main body directly. His hand glowing intensely, he begins to channel his energy for the attack. With a great shout, our hero unleashes his powerful technique known as Shooting Star. The powerful magic of light pierces through the creature's chest without any difficulty. The mage's attack hits its mark, easily perforating the zombie's body. But the vampire on the throne simply watches the entire scene with a smile on her face. With a look of mockery, she makes a hand signal, preparing to counterattack. She then extends her hand, ready to unleash one of her powerful spells. Unfazed by the scene, our hero glares at her with a serious and determined expression. Out of nowhere, a beam of white light shoots from the vampire's hand towards the ceiling. The woman is shocked, asking how her invincible barrier was shattered so easily. The vampire explains that the barrier that was reflected was the same type as the one they were using. With a newfound power, he faces the enemy, preparing for his next attack. With a look of pure astonishment, the vampire can't believe her strongest attack has failed. The mage then lunges forward at high speed, preparing to attack the enemy up close. With wide eyes, the little vampire asks if they managed to hit her. But the vampire simply catches our hero's head in her powerful hand. She then asks if he really thought a superior species would fall from a single blow. The young man thinks that, as expected of an immortal monster, she is truly formidable. Carmilla despairs upon seeing the body still moving and asks what they are going to do. With a serious look, he says there's no other way, he'll have to use that. With a touch on her shoulder, our hero prepares to give the little one a mission. He tells her he's counting on her, and Carmilla is shocked, not understanding the situation. The mage explains he needs time to prepare and tells her to keep the enemy occupied. With a scream of panic, the vampire says there's no way she can possibly do that. He insists she only needs to buy some time and that he will lend her some of his power. A smile playing on her lips, the vampire on the throne orders her servants to attack without mercy. The little one tries to run, and he says he's counting on her, but Carmilla warns she's just going to leave. With a cold gaze, our hero threatens the young woman, saying he will extinguish the flame of her life. The vampire freezes in pure terror upon hearing the mage's threat, who glares at her seriously. With a furious scream, the little one glares at him and asks if he's some kind of demon. With no other choice, Carmilla charges into battle, cursing the mage for putting her in this situation. A dagger in hand, the young woman prepares to fight against the horde of zombies. She grips the weapon firmly, ready to show off her power as a vampire. With a battle cry, the little one charges headfirst into the massive dungeon monsters. With a swift and precise cut, she manages to run one of the zombies through with her dagger. The young woman then continues to press forward, fighting relentlessly against the horde of monsters. With a determined look, the little vampire shows that she is not to be trifled with. The mage observes, thinking that at this rate, she'll be able to hold off the enemy for a while. The vampire on the throne then places a hand on her head, appearing to be deep in thought. She thinks about something problematic, and our hero says the feeling is entirely mutual. With that, we see the image of the vampire's golden scale glowing intensely. Surrounded by zombies, the little one continues to fight bravely to buy time for the mage. With a hand signal, our protagonist finally prepares to use his technique. The enemy says she doesn't know what he's planning, but she will strike first. With a serious look, the vampire commands for the soul to be placed upon the scale. A blue flame materializes, and the woman reveals that is our protagonist's soul. On the other side, a larger, darker flame appears, and the mage identifies it as his own soul. The two souls are then placed on the golden scale for the vampire's ritual. With a smile, the woman announces she will now begin her ritual of judgment. Our hero then stares at her with a serious expression, bracing himself for what's to come. The vampire explains that the strength of their souls will be measured, and the stronger one will impose their will upon the other. She says it's a measure of the strength of their feelings, and the mage replies that in that case, he's already won. At his words, the scale tips heavily to his side, and the enemy screams that it's impossible. The woman shouts that she has lived for an eternity, and her mental fortitude has reached the realm of the gods. But with a confident smile, our hero faces her, completely unfazed by her words. The vampire says she is immortal, but the young man reveals that's fine, because he's bought enough time. Not understanding at all, the enemy glares at him and demands to know what he meant by that. With a great shout, our hero activates his angel summoning, calling the creature to his side. With a brilliant flash, the powerful angel Serial appears, ready for the great battle. The imposing celestial being then takes her place behind the mage with a serious and focused expression. With her eyes closed, the angel appears perfectly calm and ready to follow the young man's orders. Our protagonist then looks at her with a determined expression, ready for his next move.